Actress Natalie Wood was intoxicated and angry after an argument between her husband and actor Christopher Walken when she stormed off a yacht this weekend and apparently fell into the sea. The report said there was no evidence of foul play in the 43-year-old actress's death.
For over 4 decades, the mysterious death of Natalie Wood has haunted Hollywood and captivated the world. How did one of cinema's brightest stars vanish into the dark waters near Catalina Island? Rumors, investigations, and unanswered questions have kept the tragedy alive. A story tangled in love, jealousy, and silence. Now, at 95 years old, Robert Wagner finally breaks his silence. His reflections reveal a man haunted by loss and regret. Could his final words uncover the truth about that fateful night? Or will they only deepen Hollywood's most enduring mystery? The night of disappearance. On the cold night of November 28, 1981, Natalie Wood vanished from the yacht Splendor while anchored near Catalina Island. The day had begun like any other, filled with laughter and good company as Natalie Wood, Robert Wagner, and close friends enjoyed the ocean. Among them was Christopher Walken, her co-star in the film Brainstorm, and Captain Dennis Devern, who was in charge of the boat. As night fell, a change in atmosphere became undeniable. A tension slowly creeping in that would cast a shadow over the evening. Natalie, notoriously afraid of deep water and unable to swim, was last seen wearing a thin nightgown with a crimson coat, an odd choice for the chilly night. Official reports initially described her death as a tragic accident, suggesting she slipped while trying to tie up the yacht's dinghy. However, the story quickly became complicated by the physical evidence on her body. Bruises and scratches didn't quite fit an innocent fall. Moreover, as someone terrified of water, many doubted Natalie would take such a risk voluntarily. Captain Dennis Devern later described a heated argument between Wagner and Natalie Wood, followed by chaos aboard the yacht. He recalled Wagner shouting, "Get off my damn boat!" before Natalie vanished into the night, leaving only the sound of waves and a drifting dinghy behind. The tension had reached its breaking point, but what happened next remained unclear. Witnesses on a nearby vessel reported hearing desperate cries for help, lasting nearly 15 minutes. Then, silence. No rescue came. By dawn, Natalie's body was found a mile away, a haunting discovery that turned mystery into tragedy. That night, shrouded in uncertainty and unanswered questions, immediately drew suspicion. Why did it take hours to report Natalie missing? Why were the searchlights never turned on? Captain Dennis Devern later revealed that Wagner had ordered him not to call for help or activate the spotlight, chilling instructions that deepened the mystery. These early inconsistencies ignited decades of rumor, doubt, and relentless investigation. The yacht's dinghy, discovered adrift with its key still in the ignition and oars tied down, told its own story. It suggested that no one had used it, directly contradicting Wagner's claim that Natalie had gone to secure it and accidentally fallen. How could she have ended up in the water without any sign of activity aboard the dinghy? This single detail became one of many that tangled the case in suspicion and disbelief. Although authorities initially ruled her death an accident, few accepted that explanation. The bruises on Natalie's body, the chaotic tension on the yacht, and the silence that followed all hinted at something far more complex and troubling beneath the surface. As the years passed, whispers of jealousy, rage, and regret only deepened the mystery. To truly understand that night, one must first confront the volatile bond between Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner. The tension that night was more than just a final clash. It was the culmination of a lifelong, complicated connection. The complicated relationship. Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner's love story was far from the Hollywood fairy tale most imagined. They first met when she was just 10 and he was 18, with Natalie famously whispering to her mother, "I'm going to marry that man." Their romance blossomed amid the spotlight, and their 1957 wedding was celebrated like a grand event, sealing their place as Hollywood's golden couple. But beneath the glamour, their relationship was marked by volatility and emotional complexity. Early on, Wagner served as Natalie's anchor, providing comfort and stability in a world where she often felt exposed. Yet, as her career soared with films like Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story, while Wagner settled into less prominent roles, cracks began to form. Jealousy, pride, and insecurity threaded through their interactions, creating a constant undercurrent of tension that sometimes exploded into conflict. Friends recalled backstage scenes where Natalie would break down, exhausted from rumors and pressures, and strained by her husband's controlling tendencies. They separated briefly in the 1960s, filing for divorce amid rumors of infidelity and emotional distance. As if caught in an unbreakable orbit, the couple reunited almost a decade later, marrying again in 1972 aboard a yacht, a symbolic setting that would, years later, become the stage of tragedy. The meeting of the two resulted in a truce, but under the surface of that calm lay fears and resentments that had not been dealt with. Wagner's jealousy kept growing, and, particularly, was noticed as Natalie was getting ready to go back to shoot with Brainstorm, where her friendship with co-star Christopher Walken was very close, and thus, Wagner's insecurities were hurting him most. Friends depicted his jealousy as a fire slowly consuming, and eventually, he could not control it anymore. The personal tensions were always there, just under the skin. Wagner became more and more jealous of Natalie's friendships, thinking he would lose her again. Natalie, on the other hand, was always a little girl wanting her father's approval and was constantly fighting against the limits of their marriage. Although the crowd celebrated a glamorous couple, their tie was tenuous and drawn out with years of jealousy, pride, and fear of speaking out. The Thanksgiving holiday in 1981 turned out to be the decisive moment. Wagner's envy of Walken, a fierce quarrel on the yacht, and the gradually widening gap between them all erupted with the rage and pain that were hard to contain. The situation was ready for a fight, but the aftermath is still a mystery covered in silence. The question of whether Natalie was slain by a misfortune or by an evil is still being asked. However, when seen through the prism of their stormy marriage, the whole tragedy reveals something very human at its core. Love that has been overpowered by fear, regret, and feelings that would not let the survivors escape. The emotional complexity surrounding their relationship would only deepen the mystery, especially as conflicting stories emerged to challenge every version of what truly happened that night. Conflicting testimonies and evidence. From the moment investigators arrived, the official story faced numerous challenges. Robert Wagner insisted the death was a tragic accident, telling authorities that Natalie left the cabin briefly to check on the dinghy and something went wrong. Yet, no one witnessed her leaving, and fellow passengers, including Christopher Walken and Captain Dennis Davern, delivered inconsistent accounts that raised more questions than answers. Captain Davern was one of the first to hint at a different reality. A heated argument on board, a glass breaking, and Wagner shouting aggressively at Natalie. Years later, Davern admitted that he had withheld information initially due to fear and pressure, revealing a deeper, darker tension that night. His testimony included the chilling detail that Wagner told him not to turn on the searchlights or call for help while Natalie was missing. The timeline itself was suspicious. Although Natalie was last seen around 11 p.m., the Coast Guard wasn't contacted until 3:30 a.m., leaving a 4-hour gap in which crucial help was delayed. Witnesses on nearby boats heard shouting and what sounded like someone struggling, but no one intervened immediately. This silence fueled growing doubts about the official accident narrative. The autopsy report further complicated the case. Natalie's blood alcohol level was found to be about 0.14%, impairing her ability to navigate safely. She also had seasickness medication and painkillers in her system, which could have added to her disorientation. More alarmingly, fresh bruises and scratches marked her arms, wrists, knees, and neck, injuries experts agreed occurred before entering the water. This suggested a possible struggle, not simply a fall. Physical evidence around the dinghy seemed to contradict Wagner's account as well. The key remained in the ignition, the engine off, and the oars tied down, making the scenario of Natalie trying to row away highly improbable. If she didn't use the dinghy, how did she end up alone in the freezing water? This inconsistency left the cause of her fall shrouded in mystery. Christopher Walken acknowledged tension that night, centered on Natalie Wood's focus on her career, a point of conflict with Robert Wagner. Though present, Walken largely remained silent throughout the investigation, deepening the mystery. Wagner's own accounts shifted over time, riddled with contradictions that fueled skepticism among both officials and the public. Nearby witnesses, Marilyn Wayne and John Payne, reported hearing a woman's terrified cries for help lasting nearly 15 minutes, followed by a calm male voice offering reassurance but taking no action. Their chilling testimony suggested that someone close enough to intervene chose not to. Decades later, the truth remains obscured by conflicting statements, elusive evidence, and memories clouded by fear and guilt. What began as an apparent accident evolved into a haunting puzzle of suspicion and silence. The layers of personal conflict and shadowed evidence invite us to consider those who orbited the scene that night, the role they played, and how their actions shaped what the world came to believe. Third parties in the mystery. The night of Natalie Wood's disappearance was not defined by two people alone. Around her and Robert Wagner stood others whose presence, silence, and actions would shape how history remembers that night. Each carried their own motives, fears, and loyalties, pieces of a puzzle that, even when assembled, refused to form a clear picture. Christopher Walken, Natalie's co-star and friend, occupied an uneasy position aboard the Splendor. His bond with Natalie, grounded in artistic respect, reportedly provoked Wagner's jealousy. Though Walken later admitted there had been tension, he refrained from expanding on what he witnessed. His silence was not defiance, but distance, an actor unwilling to become a character in a scandal he could never escape. To this day, his quiet detachment remains one of the mystery's most haunting elements. Captain Dennis Davern's account provided a different viewpoint. He was in the middle of the employer-employee relationship and the moral duty, and witnessed the argument escalating into something very serious. Eventually, Davern, speaking years later when guilt had triumphed over fear, described the yacht as a place of tense control and disorder. His memories, although often challenged, reopened old wounds and showed how loyalty and the will to survive could hide or even completely distort the truth. Marilyn Wayne and John Payne, the people beyond the yacht, were also there to witness and to introduce dark voices. They were in a boat close to the Splendor and accused the yacht crew of not paying attention to the woman, whose sworn statements were diluted by the nearby anchor. The calm male response, "Okay, honey, we'll get you," and the lack of rescue became their nightmares for years. Wayne was later threatened to keep quiet, which was a ghostly reminder of how far the catastrophe's influences went encompassing even those who were not on the splendor directly. These accounts from third parties made it difficult to come to any conclusions about the matter. Their respective doubts are neither allowed to be ignored nor completely accepted at the same time. The contradictions resulting from the different accounts not only made the investigation more complicated, but also showed the mixed-up nature of human perception, which is influenced by fear and guilt. The restraint of Walken, the guilt of Davern, and the defiance of Wayne could be seen as a triangle of viewpoints that blended fact with emotion. It was not strangers who saw the night when Natalie Wood disappeared, but those who were connected to her with love, loyalty, and fear. Each one of them, in his or her own way, was a bearer of some truth, and maybe a bearer of some silence as well, which kept the full story just beyond the reach of everyone. The complicated threads of eyewitness accounts and silent witnesses only deepened as the law stepped in to untangle what the night truly held. The police investigation and reopened case. The anniversary of Natalie Wood's death marked not just a passage of time, but the beginning of a labyrinthine investigation filled with conflicting evidence and reopening chapters. Initially closed in 2003, the case was labeled an accidental drowning, though doubts lingered beneath official findings. Years later, new testimonies and revelations would breathe life back into the mystery, forcing authorities to take a second, more critical look. In 2011, Captain Dennis Davern broke his long silence, confessing he had lied by omission during the original investigation. His statement about overhearing Wagner's cold order, "Leave her there," and about hearing a splash consistent with someone forcibly entering the water, reignited public and police scrutiny. This confession was pivotal, prompting the Los Angeles Police Department to reopen the case and reevaluate key details. Following Davern's admission, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office amended Natalie Wood's death certificate in 2012. The cause of death was changed from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors, officially acknowledging that suspicions about the circumstances were valid. This shift symbolized a major turning point and validated the calls for a renewed, thorough investigation. Further investigations uncovered troubling gaps and inconsistencies in Robert Wagner's accounts. He was identified as the last person known to be with Natalie, a fact that placed him under intense scrutiny. His statements over the years seemed to evolve, sometimes contradicting previous versions, deepening the public's suspicions and investigators' doubts. In 2018, the LAPD publicly named Wagner a person of interest in the case. This designation highlighted the belief that he was directly connected to the events leading to Natalie's death, although no formal charges were filed. Police pointed to the bruises on Natalie's body as consistent with physical assault, corroborated by witness statements describing violent arguments and raised voices aboard the yacht. Despite the mounting suspicions, Robert Wagner consistently denied any wrongdoing. His lawyers dismissed allegations as baseless, and Wagner himself maintained that the night's events were a tragic accident, fueled by misunderstanding and misfortune. Christopher Walken, remaining silent throughout, neither confirmed nor denied suspicions, leaving an air of ambiguity. The case lingered unresolved, teetering between inconclusive evidence and public debate. New witnesses, including a teenage fisherman who claimed to have heard screams that night, and former colleagues recounting Wagner's past behavior toward Natalie, surfaced over the years. These accounts kept the investigation active, but failed to provide conclusive proof to close the mystery. Even in 2022, Wagner was cleared of suspicion due to insufficient evidence, yet the investigation was never officially closed. The door remains ajar, echoing with the question that has haunted investigators, friends, and family alike. What truly happened on the dark waters off Catalina Island that November night? As decades passed and the law circled back, Robert Wagner's voice, once silent, slowly emerged, laden with regret and haunted memories that continue to stir questions long after the final chapters seemed written. Robert Wagner's final reflections. In his twilight years, Robert Wagner began speaking more openly about the night that haunted him for decades. At 95, his trembling voice carried both sorrow and regret as he recalled memories long buried. He admitted there were things he wished he could change, acknowledging the mystery and pain that had followed him since Natalie Wood's death. His reflections revealed not just a man under suspicion, but one deeply scarred by loss. Wagner always denied any involvement to Natalie, insisting her death was a tragic accident. Still, the unanswered questions and gaps in his story fueled public doubt. He spoke of their argument over Natalie's career and Christopher Walken, admitting he might have overreacted but never imagined tragedy would follow. His quiet statement, "I was the last man with her," carried both guilt and uncertainty. Despite decades of rumors and investigations, Wagner maintained he didn't know what happened after Natalie left the cabin. That uncertainty defined his later years, consumed by haunting what-ifs. He often wondered whether he could have done something differently. His words painted the portrait of a man burdened by the shadows of that night. Friends and family described Wagner as sorrowful, not malicious. His daughter, Natasha Gregson Wagner, defended him publicly, affirming his deep love for Natalie and calling her mother's death a heartbreaking accident. She said his pain was palpable, a heaviness no public judgment could ease, a reminder that behind the scandal was enduring grief. Wagner gradually reduced his visibility in the media. The charismatic actor of the past gradually became less talkative, kept away from the sea, and even the pictures of Natalie were not for him anymore. His retreat into silence showed the intensity of his sorrow and the impact of the tragedy on his last decades. He became less connected to the glitzy world of Hollywood and more to a serene, firm, and deep-rooted grief. Wagner, in his memoir, Pieces of My Heart, said, "Not a day goes by that I don't think of Natalie." The sentence expressed the emptiness her departure caused in his existence, a sorrow that still was there even after many years had passed. With age and sickness, he gradually lost his boldness in defense and shifted to an apologetic tone. He confessed in one of his last interviews, "I was a man in love who made mistakes, and I've been paying for them every single day since." It was not a confession, but rather an exhausted recognition of his regret. The legacy of Robert Wagner is still mixed up in the narrative of Natalie Wood, a saga of love, loss, and questions without answers. The complete truth is still very much uncertain regarding whether it will ever come out. Nevertheless, his last reflections do show a man who has been transformed through the very dark night of his life. The tragic story of Natalie Wood's death is a haunting reminder of how love, jealousy, and mystery can shape lives in ways that echo for decades. While the truth may never be fully known, the sorrow and longing in Robert Wagner's final words reveal the deeply human pain behind the headlines. If you found this story compelling, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more deep dives into Hollywood's most enduring mysteries, and watch the next video shown on the screen. Thank you for watching.